If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This episode is sponsored by Well Balanced Nutrition and 360 Health.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hello, everybody. We're back in the podcast studio, and today we have a guest with us. Valerie Kiser has joined us. Kristen Norton is here, and Timothy Beeman, our producer, podcast father.
Formerly call me Timothy. I like that's funny.
Well, that's the way your email is, too.
Yeah.
And the third.
I'm the second. My son's the third.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I've corrected that. Well, anyway, Valerie, I have known you for a while.
Long time.
Yes, and you have a wonderful business in my community. You have a yoga studio called Sunrise Yoga, and I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and it, because we have read a book that you recommended to me that I actually loved, and I will find out what Kristen thought about it, called Bringing Yoga into Life, The Everyday Practice of Enlightened Living by Donna Farhi. And she is a practitioner for 28 years and has taught internationally, one of America's most respected and loved yoga teachers. Maybe you've studied with her, I don't know. She's traveled throughout the world leading retreats and training others to teach. And she's been a columnist and a writer. And this book is published by Harper One, which is a part of HarperCollins, which is a really well-established publishing house. And it came out in 2004. So it's not one of our most current reads. But I had asked Valerie, because of her extensive knowledge and her teaching experience, what book would you suggest for someone who wants to know what is yoga, not how to do it, not a guide with the poses. And this is what you offer. So tell us about you and how your journey has brought you to your business and all, and yoga.
Sure. Well, I am Valerie Kiser. I'm the owner of Sunrise Yoga Studio and have owned the studio for 19 years now. Oh. Just had our anniversary in June.
Yay!
Yay! I've been teaching 23 years, I think. I was thinking about that coming over here.
Wow.
And how I got into it was I was a student just like anybody else. I was a member of a gym and actually was teaching aerobics and personal training back in the day. And they brought in a yoga teacher, and she, well, to tell you how long ago this has been, put a poster up and had cut out pictures from a magazine of what yoga was. And I thought, well, that looked kind of cool, seeing the images. And, having a dance background, I thought, well, that looks interesting. I could do that.
You have a dance background.
I do. Actually, I have my minor in college is dance.
Okay.
And so I said, I'm just going to start signing up and taking classes. And a very unauspicious start is when I was supposed to start taking classes, I ended up having appendicitis. And so that knocked me out for a while, because that was back in the day when they actually did, cut surgery. So that was how I started yoga. But anyway, so when I did get into it, I absolutely fell in love and just couldn't get enough of it, and started taking classes from anybody and everybody that I could find and traveling for workshops, and just totally got sucked into it, and then realized that it wasn't just about the poses, which is what this book is about. There's down dogs and triangle poses, but there's a huge, extensive, long philosophy that goes with it, and that's really what draws me and keeps me in it. Yeah.
Do you hear that background noise?
I do. I'm trying to figure it out.
We have construction going on next door, so we don't know. Anyway.
That's not what that is, though. This is my stuff. This is my problem.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll see what happens there.
Okay.
All right. Well, so since you've been in it for 28 years, I have been around longer than 28 years, and I have not been practicing yoga, but I do stay kind of on the edge and fringe of these things. And I remember that yoga, when it was taught at the YMCA, was called something else. It was not called yoga. So it's taken a while for the general population to kind of embrace yoga as yoga.
In this area, that's very true. It used to be called stretch and relax.
Yes.
Yes, because they could not call it yoga because it might mean something some people found offensive.
Are we still connecting?
You are.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, that idea, though, it surprised me at the time, because I thought, what's the issue? And then I think it has to do with belief systems. And what I personally find when I look at these things, I don't see such a dichotomy between these belief systems. So I think it is somewhat surprising that there was resistance for as long as there was. So let me just read a little thing here at the beginning of the book to start our conversation. Thank you for sharing your story. This book is written for people who have given up the fantasy that happiness is determined by luck and circumstance and have realized that a meaningful and fulfilling life is the result of skillful means and self-determination. So, what is happiness? How do we find it? Are we in control of that or whatever? And then over here, she says, living is an intuitive state. Well, living in an unitive state is not an esoteric concept. It is not an elusive higher realm that only very clever people can aspire to. It is the opening of the heart so that we have the capacity to feel tenderness, joy, and sorrow without shutting down. It's the opening of the mind to an awareness that encompasses rather than excludes. It is the startling and immediate recognition of our basic sameness. It is the practice of observing clearly, listening acutely, and skillfully responding to the moment with all the compassion we can muster. And it is a homecoming with and in the body, for it is only here that we can do all things. I thought, okay, I'm reading this book. Yeah, that grabbed me right there. Any response to those selections?
Good choice.
We have just been reviewing in another podcast episode the polyvagal theory, talking about either living in safety or living in a responsive action, sympathetic fight or flight, or a collapse, shutdown. And I think this kind of spoke to that as well. To be alive, we have to be in that safe area to have the connection and the sociality of. And so anyway, let's explore a little bit more of what they say in this book. There's a lot of language that is not common to the English world, like yamas and yin-yamas. And
Oh, that was well pronounced.
Oh, okay,
good job.
good.
Yes, good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, so
So-
the traditional language of yoga is Sanskrit, one of the oldest languages that we have. So a lot of the terms that we use in yoga are Sanskrit. The names of poses are Sanskrit. It's just like if you were going to go take a ballet class. You learn plie and tendu and pirouette. It's French because that's where it was created. So it's the same idea with yoga. It's Sanskrit.
And so do we continue to promote those? We don't change those terms to something that's more meaningful, like stretch and relax?
At my studio, we use the Sanskrit. We also do use English because not everybody knows Sanskrit, of course. It's not a common language.
But you do teach them the Sanskrit.
We do teach Sanskrit, absolutely.
Have you done yoga, Kristen?
So
Because
I've
she's got a
only
gymnast background.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
I've only dabbled in it, and so I've done it like at a YMCA once, and that was very intimidating. And I got
Why? Why was it intimidating?
because I was the only one that was
Didn't know
a
how to
first
do it.
timer. Which I feel like can happen in some of the classes, and also I got a major migraine afterwards.
Ooh.
And then I've dabbled in it a lot at home because it's comforting to try something at home, especially when you're
brand new,
new to it and all the terminology. So I feel like I've only been exposed to the stretch and relax variety of yoga, unfortunately.
Well, but that's great too. I mean, and honestly, that's how most of us get started. I mean, I would dare say there are probably not too many of us who say, I want to find a deeper way of living, and yoga's how they go express it. No, it's, I have back pain, I have stress, I need to stretch, my neck hurts.
My friend asked me to come.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I got drug here by
Yeah,
somebody. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably for 99% of us in this country, that is how we get started.
And then it just pulls us in with so much more that it has to offer.
Right. They're just because there are so many other layers like this book talks about. It's not just the physical, let me go do a down dog.
Right.
How can I change my life? How can I find a deeper state of compassion and happiness, like that quote you read?
I loved it. It's like, I'm in.
Yeah.
Well, one of the chapters in her book is how to select a teacher, which, when you have an experience like Kristen just described, and she probably didn't shop around for teachers, you just found a class and went or whatever.
Sure.
I thought that chapter was wonderful about how do you do that. And, you said you were intimidated, and there was a story in this book about one of her students who was rather large and wore very drapey clothing. and she wanted her to put on a leotard so that she could see her body and give her constructive help with the practice. And the girl didn't want to do it, and so the teacher learned a lesson in that. I thought, and I like the way Donna writes. I mean, she does incorporate her story through this and explains how she also modified and grew in the practice. But the thing is, the girl went to put the leotards on at the shop, and by the end of the session of trying to get her blubbery body, as she said, the student said, the teacher didn't say that, the student said it, she was in a meltdown, shut down, polyvagal on the floor. I can't go anywhere. I'm ugly. I'm awful. And so the teacher said, no problem. What's comfortable for you to wear in this class is appropriate now. And then over time, the girl modulates to the appropriate clothing and so on and so forth. Right. And, when we talk about body image and women in the United States, which we've struggled with for so many years, and I think we're getting a little more tolerant and including diverse bodies, I've seen some extremely large people doing yoga and going, oh my gosh, you got in that position and I can't, And so I think this is a wonderfully inclusive, like she said here, it's not exclusive, it is inclusive.
Yoga's for everybody, but every type of body, but the wellness industry.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Can really make it look like only blonde, thin, tall girls can do yoga.
Oh, absolutely. It's very much.
Oh, that's not us, is it?
Yeah.
Definitely not me.
No.
That's very much true. And I mean, if you really want to get down to it, let's throw white in there too.
Yeah.
Because it's typically, thin, young, white, physically.
Why do you think
fit.
that is?
Well, there's a long story of how yoga even came to this country.
Oh, okay.
And that's beyond the scope, I'm sure, what y'all want to get into right now. But it really started with more affluent Caucasian, more like in the Northeast.
They could travel to India and sit with the guru.
Yeah. So,
and who had the money to do that.
Yeah, had the money. And then, with folks from India who started to come to this country and changes in immigration rules, and again, a long history that goes
because
with
Indians
all
are
that.
not white and they're not typically rich.
No. Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly that. How did it come from a foreign country and end up here? And I think there is certainly a lot of that perception, and unfortunately, a lot of that is reality of how do we become more inclusive and how do we work toward becoming more diverse and sharing this with everyone who has a body, like you said.
Mm-hmm. What do you find works for welcoming in a variety? How do you incorporate that at Sunrise Yoga?
Well, have found for us is that we're not the young, thin, fit. That's not really our student. That's not our student base. We tend to be a little more middle-aged, a little more, quote, normal, unquote, however you want to describe that, of all body shapes, all body sizes, different backgrounds. And so I think that is changing, but I think we got a long way to go, too, just in general.
Right.
Yeah.
This book is divided into parts. It's got coming home, where we begin, and it kind of ends with yoga as a life practice. So once you, like I think you, Valerie, have made it a life practice, and I think Donna has, and I think many of your students have, because I know students who have trained with you who are living yoga, and I think one of the things she talks about, or the book mentions, is this is not something you stay dependent on your teacher. You embrace it and become your own, and you explore the teacher and the student and yourself or something. Is that right? Right.
And there's definitely a piece of, and this has come out in the past, I don't know, 10, 20 years of not becoming dependent on gurus, because as we've learned in the media, they don't all behave as they should. And so it is finding your own inner teacher. That's definitely a part of it, is trusting your own instinct and trusting your own gut. And, hey, maybe I went to a class and that was not the right kind of class for me, rather than just going, okay, well, that teacher, she was the expert, she knows everything, and I'm going to do anything and everything she tells me to do.
Even though I'm going to quit.
Yeah. Even though that may not be the right thing because you got a migraine at the end of class. So something that you did in that class was not the right thing for you. And trusting your gut to go, that wasn't the right thing, rather than, okay, I'm going to tell you what to do and here's how to do it.
So using your polyvagal to come back to safety.
That's right.
You know,
Right.
to reflect. Remember, we said react,
Right.
and then reflect on what happened.
React, return,
The
and
three
then
R's.
reflect.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, going back to the nervous system and finding that state of
Yeah.
the yeah.
I'd like to elaborate on this chapter called "The Freedom of Discipline." Is that okay?
Yeah,
Or did
and
you
then
have something ahead of?
well, I don't know if it's ahead or not. It's the idea of self.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll follow you.
When we realize that the entity that we call ourself is the clearinghouse for everything that will happen to us, we may wake up to the realization that attending to the inner hygiene of this self is the most important thing we could possibly do in a lifetime. And then she talks about yoga is a technology for removing the illusory veil that stands between us and the animating force of life. And that self and the big self is a conversation that runs through this book, that we are the big self. It was very interesting. So that kind of runs underneath what I think you're going to talk about,
Well,
or what caught your eye.
this caught my eye because as a dietitian, this is, and from my own experience, this is what we struggle with, I think, as humans is, yoga is, I would say, a form of meditation. It can be. And she says an important part of learning to channel our energies is increasing our tolerance for staying in the pause between desire and satisfaction. So 2 things came up for me, right? Like yoga can be hard for us because we have to be still and quiet and calm our mind, and that can be tricky. And then also, we'd had a book, I don't know what episode, maybe Tim can find it, but Unwinding Anxiety talks about how we are so accustomed to meeting our needs right away. If we want something, we click on our phone, our
Immediate
little computer,
gratification, yeah.
and it comes to our doorstep in 2 days. So she says,
Episode 63.
thank you. If we can get comfortable in being in that pause, however it manifests for us physically, psychologically, or emotionally, we have a better chance of responding to our longing in a way that is not simply a stopgap measure. Maybe we have become accustomed to grabbing for the remote, pouring ourselves a drink, or reaching for the phone, reaching for a snack. Usually these mechanical strategies simply dull or numb our feeling state. When we contain rather than constantly discharge our feeling state, we can allow ourselves to feel completely. So not only embracing the pause, but embracing our feelings is something we can get from yoga. Who knew?
Who knew? And it does dovetail perfectly in with what you do as a dietitian.
Right.
Is paying attention to those signals and those sensations.
Right. If we teach people to take a pause and think about, why am I reaching for this snack? Because we all tend to do things so automatically. And so do you feel like when you practice yoga more, you can do that more in everyday life? You can be comfortable with that pause. You can tune in before you make that automatic action.
Absolutely. It doesn't, speaking
Doesn't
for myself.
take it away.
Yeah, sure. It doesn't take it away. It doesn't mean that, I never have any, desires or I want a snack that's unhealthy or whatever it might be. But yeah, it has really taught me to take a moment and say, is that what I really want? Do I really need that right now? And if I say, well, yes, I do, well, why? And it's just observing those, becoming the observer of the thoughts, of the sensations, of the feelings, of the emotions, and being able to take that step back and become the witness to it.
So many of our books have talked about listening to your body signals, and
Yeah.
I keep saying, "Okay, what are you listening with? Is
What's
it an
it
ear?
saying? Yeah.
And that's kind of think what yoga may help us get in touch with is that the feeling is hearing. I feel this, so what do I think about it? Why do I feel, or what caused me to feel, or and reflect on, do I like feeling this way?
Yeah, and
Yeah, this
sometimes
feels good.
Yeah, and sometimes the term used is felt sense.
Oh, okay.
Is that just felt? What do I feel in my body? Oh, I feel a knot in my gut, or oh, I feel my heart racing, or whatever it might be. And it's starting. Okay, well, where did that come from?
And that's what we ignore when we reach for things too quickly. I think it's like we just circumvent that stop, and the pause lets you then ask those questions.
Right.
Pause.
Because I guess it can be uncomfortable if we don't know how to.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so. We don't like that.
Right.
We don't like the silence. We don't like quiet. And yoga classes, that's new for people. You were talking about, you mentioned that earlier about sometimes there's the challenge of being quiet and being quiet in a room and what do you mean there's no noise?
I got things to do. I got to go. Come on.
Yeah, I know. And then
what am I
people
cooking
checking
for
their
dinner?
Yeah, exactly. Checking their phone, checking
Yeah.
their iWatch, or, whatever they're doing. And it's like, okay, how do we
Stop.
get comfortable? Yes, how do we stop? How do we get comfortable with it?
So confession, I did yoga this morning to prepare for the session.
I almost did. But then I said no.
And it was only a 25-minute video, and I got in
Did you hear that judgment? Only
only
25.
I got into 15 minutes, and I was checking my phone. How long is this? Do I have any emails?
Did you get a headache?
I didn't get a headache.
Okay, good. Oh, shoot.
So I'm curious, and you may not, because it may just be getting used to it, but do you have any words of wisdom for people who want to get into yoga but feel like it would be hard to do an hour-long session? Or
She talks in this book parts roadblocks and distractions.
Yeah, that's a good section.
Whole
of the book,
section
too.
on your questions. So
No,
yes.
but I want to hear from
you
the
probably do.
expert here.
Well, and maybe it's starting with 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. Maybe if an hour is just too much to even consider, is starting with 5 minutes at home.
Yeah, don't they talk about when we're setting up expectations and goals, if we overstretch, we're less likely to do them?
Right.
So that idea of baby steps, we've run into that many times, is go slow.
Yeah.
Just start.
Right.
Just start.
Right.
Put the clothes on if that's all you got to do.
Right, and there are definitely a lot of stories about, well, how do you, create a pattern? How do you create a habit? How do you get started? There's one meditation teacher who tells the story of how do you create a meditation habit? And she said, well, just go sit on your meditation cushion. I don't care if while you're sitting on it, you're making your grocery list. Just make the habit of sitting on your meditation cushion. And you make your grocery list, and then you go, well, I'm here, I might as well meditate. And so then you do.
Yeah.
It's most likely what happens. And I think the same thing happens on the yoga mat is, okay, well, I don't too much. Just go sit on your
Roll it
mat.
out, yeah, right.
And then most likely you're going to be like, well, while I'm here, I might as well do something.
Right.
And one of the things that I encourage my students, and I teach this even in my teacher training programs, is start with 3 poses. Pick one you like, because that means you'll do it. Mm-hmm. Pick one you really don't care for, because that's, for most of us, that's probably what we need. And then pick one you don't have an opinion on. So a like, dislike, neutral.
Okay.
And start with 3 poses. And just oftentimes if you do that, my hamstrings are a little tight. Let me go ahead and do this. Well, let me go ahead and do that while I'm here. And then before you know it, you got to practice.
Nice. That's an excellent tip. In the beginning, I can't remember where I found it, but I almost felt like Donna was telling us that it had to be, this is my interpretation, that it had to be like a meaningful setup, right? Like you can't just go into your living room and go through these motions. She really wants you to have a place that you always go back to that's
What do you think of
comforting.
that?
Yeah, I think there's a difference, and I think this is true for whether it's yoga or meditation practice, that there's a difference between like formal practice and informal practice. So if I'm going to lie on the floor and stretch while I've got the evening news on, I wouldn't call that formal practice because I'm not paying attention. I've got the news on, the dog's on top of me, whatever. So I would call that informal practice. But I do think there's value because I think there's the discipline, there's the structure that goes with a formal practice of setting aside a space. Because part of that also is respecting yourself and the practice enough to create a space. And I can give an example of that. Actually, it was during the pandemic. So when we were shut down, teaching on Zoom, and oftentimes we were teaching on Zoom, and we'd see our students online, and they were like in the corner of the room. They had like no props. They had a mat, and they were like shoved in the corner of a room. And as month after month went on, they started, moving furniture, and they started coming to the studio and buying props to practice with at home. And before you know it, they had a big old space that was their yoga space.
Cool.
And so just watching their practice develop and evolve in that home setting, and granted it was kind of forced because there we were during the pandemic.
Yeah, and there is a commitment there.
But there was a commitment to it.
Yeah.
And that they created a dedicated formal space to the practice. And there's value to both, because if you're going to say, well, the only way I'm going to do it is if I lie on the floor while the news is on.
then it's better than not
It's
doing
better,
it at all.
exactly. It's better than nothing.
Right.
It's better than nothing. So I'm not going to say, oh, don't do it. It's a waste of time.
Yeah, and I would think if I have to have a space and I don't know where it's going to be and I don't have it, then that shuts you down too.
Exactly.
So it's like,
So
don't
if
worry about it.
If that's the deterrent,
Yes.
figure something. Yeah, find something. Yeah.
Well, I'm always interested in these authors as to what brought them. I asked you how you got to it. And it looks like she got into it. She says, I began my own yoga practice at the age of 16. Let's see, what does it say? I was but a year away from entering a phase of undiagnosed eating disorder, beginning with anorexia, progressing to an all-consuming conflictual relationship with food. This disorder would tyrannize my life well into my 20s. So it seems as if she got a grip on that through this yoga practice.
Yeah.
So therapeutically, yes, there you go.
Yeah, this makes me think. So we've been talking about, re-owning your body, right? Reliving in your own body. And that makes me think of disordered eating a lot, right? Our past podcast episode, we talked to Brittany about body work and healing. And then we talked previously about the polyvagal theory and just finding ways to feel safe in our body again. And I know that you're a yoga therapist. Does that come together in any way? What is a yoga therapist, and does it help you be home in your body again?
Yes, and yes. To all the above. So a yoga therapist is actually more of a newer term. It's someone who has done extensive training beyond just being a yoga teacher. The minimum standard is 800 hours of training after becoming a yoga teacher.
Wow.
And so I got my certification back in 2008, 2012, I don't know, a long time ago. But what a yoga therapist is using all the tools of yoga. So it's not just the physical poses. We use breathing practices and meditation and mindfulness techniques and possibly lifestyle changes and looking at the whole being, not just the physical form, but your mental state, your emotional state, your spiritual state, who are you really, and incorporating all of that. And so to use your example of like eating disorders, yes, I have worked with some folks with eating disorders, and it's not just, okay, physically, how do we deal with it? It's looking at the whole being, not just this physical thing that I can touch.
That's fantastic. So why would somebody reach out to a yoga therapist?
Well, it depends. I've seen folks for eating disorders. That's one of them. It could be anything from digestive problems to sleep issues, more internal things like that. It's also anxiety, depression type issues. It's also, I had shoulder surgery a few weeks ago. I've been released from PT, but I'm still not 100%. So it could be anything from the physical form to more systemic type things as well as emotional issues as well.
That sounds like really rewarding work.
It really is. Yeah,
Fantastic.
It's pretty amazing.
Do you ever have people come in and say, I just want to reconnect with the life force?
No, I have not had that yet.
Well, I might be knocking on your door.
Okay, then. Come on down.
There's a chapter in here called Trusting the Mystery. Your task is to love what you don't understand. That's by Rilke. I love the quotes that she has at the beginning of each chapter. They're almost as good as what she writes about. But, that idea of mystery and how uncomfortable we are when we get still and quiet, sometimes that frightens us as to, maybe I don't want to go there.
So, very much so.
Yeah. And I like the idea that she was talking about suffering and the different types of suffering that we experience. And some of us get the idea that our life is going to be wonderful forever, and there will be no suffering. But what she's saying in this practice is it goes with you through the good times and the bad times and can give you that steadiness as you flow. And that's not just, can I do downward dog? It's that benefit of the practice and establishing it. I just think her writing is very smooth. Did you have any trouble reading her?
It's definitely a neat and unique writing style. It's not the easiest for me to read.
Okay.
But I enjoyed it. I appreciated it.
I like some of the stories that she had in here about, like, the fellow that was smuggling the donkeys across the Chinese border, and they never saw that. It was the most obvious thing that he was smuggling, and they kept patting him down, trying to figure out, what are you carrying? And we know you're doing a trade. And then there's the story about the farmer who has a son that breaks his leg, and the neighbor says, "Oh, that's a shame." The farmer says, "Maybe," And then the war comes, and the guy doesn't go to the army because he has a broken leg, and says, "Oh, that's good." And the farmer says, "No, maybe," and it just goes on that maybe. We don't know what's good, what's bad. We just know we are.
That kind of goes into her being a neutral witness, or says that we should be a neutral witness for ourselves and others, right? When we're in the silence and noting our feelings, that we can just be neutral. We don't have to judge that as good or bad. It just is. It's just a thought. We easily take our own perceptions of the world and interpret what I think you're feeling into something, instead of being a neutral witness, which I could learn from yoga. She says, here's the difference. You are obviously very depressed today, versus it looks as if you are depressed today, or when you move. So I thought that was
subtle but very powerful. Right, yeah. You mentioned that a lot of your clients are more mature. Is that a way to say that? And in here, when she's talking about the seasons of practice, I like the section she says, in Western cultures where aging, especially for women, is something to be fought, denied, and seen as a source of shame, there is a tendency to turn back to more outer-directed practices just when the psyche is calling us inward. We may keep ourselves busy in our yoga practice just when we are really desiring a greater intimacy with internal silence and stillness. And this can be a time when practicing with others and finding support of other like-minded souls by attending classes and retreats can build trust in ourselves in the process of the inner unfolding. So you're offering that to a lot of people, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. That we do have that community of folks who are coming together to say, hey, we want to make a difference in our bodies, ourselves, our minds, our world, our community, whatever it might be, and being amongst other people in a similar quest or journey. Yeah.
Yeah. What was your favorite part of the book?
Well, if you've noticed, I've underlined heavily.
You're like me.
Yeah, and I've used this book in all of my teacher training programs in my 200-hour program that I've been running for a long time. It is required reading for them because I think it is, and you mentioned the teaching part earlier and finding a teacher. And anyway, I think it's got a lot of good nuggets. But one thing in particular that I've dog-eared and starred, it's actually on page 94, because I think this is a reminder that even I tell the teachers that I'm training, the point of practicing asanas, and asana means pose or posture, so the poses we do, the point of practicing asanas is to become sensitive, attuned, and adaptable. Whether we attain great gymnastic ability becomes entirely inconsequential in the context of yoga as a life practice. And then she goes on that same vein, in the very last sentence in that paragraph, is advanced practice is any movement that brings us closer to this recognition of our true self.
Yeah, and then she goes on, because I underlined, then the body becomes a sacred sanctuary in which that which is worshipped, the worshiper and the place of worship merge into one.
Ooh, powerful.
Oh, yeah, man. I think so. Since you brought up asana, I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about that Sanskrit before we wrap it up, because the yamas and ninyamas, I was trying to draw a chart, because she kept talking about these two underlying principles, and then the 8 principles after that, and I can't I can't draw the tree.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be easy. And then the other thing is that she went to New Zealand, immigrated to New Zealand.
And she's still there.
Did you go to New Zealand too?
No.
Okay, I was thinking you could tell us about that
Unfortunately,
trip.
I've not studied with her as much as I would have liked, because she's primarily there. But I have done some online studies with her.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so what about the
whole
underlying
yamas
principle?
and
Yeah, the ninyas and nyanyas.
All that.
And the Brahmins.
All that kind of stuff. Okay. So Patanjali is given credit
Yeah.
for codifying the Yoga Sutras.
Yeah, and there's the Kama Sutra and the Yoga Sutra, right?
Different things. Totally different things.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, totally different.
Oh, Jim knows that one.
I got a chuckle out of that one. So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he codified this
Long time ago.
Long time ago. Greatly debated when, of course, as everything that's ancient, but 2,500-ish years ago, something like 2,000-ish. And as part of that, the underlying principle, one section of it is called Ashtanga Yoga, which is the 8-limb path.
Yes, that's what she's talking about.
Yeah. So that, and the first two limbs are yama is one, and niyama is number two.
So do they come off of a trunk?
Well, kind of. It's interesting. People will describe it different ways. Is that it's like a ladder. Some people will describe it as that. Is you got to do this before you do that, but it's not really like that. It's more like a wheel. Is that all these different components work together. So yama, those are your ethical principles. Niyamas are more internal ethical principles and practices. And then the third limb of yoga is asana, which in its traditional setting, as described in the Yoga Sutras, was not necessarily doing down dog, but it was your seat. Literally, you're sitting for meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then it's the breathing practices and the turning your attention inward. And then the layers that move deeper into that are concentration, meditation, and then enlightenment. So you've got those 8 limbs of yoga, and she did talk a lot about the yamas and the niyamas, which are the ethical principles.
Yeah.
And they look kind of like the 10 Commandments.
Uh-huh.
Or the Eightfold Path in Buddhism also. It looks very similar to other
And that's what I was
things.
saying. It seems to me you can find a hook in there, whatever belief system you
Oh,
may
absolutely.
have.
Yeah,
it seems
don't-
universal.
Non-harming.
Yes.
Tell the truth.
Uh-huh.
Moderate your energy. Practice contentment. I mean, it's
Good stuff. If we
yes,
would
good
do it, it
stuff.
would
Yeah,
probably
it's
make
good
a difference
stuff.
in
I don't care what you
society.
believe, but
Yeah.
yeah, if you just want to be a good human being, those are probably good things to practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot to think about here. And I had at one point thought I understood that those poses, is that the asana?
Mm-hmm.
Or were the readiness to get you to the meditative, to ready the body for the meditation. Is that off base?
No, not at all.
Okay. Because I sense that sometimes. And so the timing of when I want to do a yoga practice, I've not found, I don't practice enough to know how to discriminate that, but I do think it's important because a lot of people do things early in the morning, but when I wake up, I don't want to get still again. But a lot of people think that's a good time to do yoga. And do you have a time of day, or is there a temporal sense of practice for us as we choose?
Well, what I tell students is the best time of day to practice is the time of day that you're going to practice. So if that means after lunch, if that means 2 a.m, if that's when you're going to do it, then that's your time to do it. Traditionally, yoga and meditation would have been practiced right before sunrise.
Yeah.
So early in the morning and then at sunset again. So morning and evening time. But that's not really practical for everybody in our society.
But
these days.
physiologically, I just don't feel. I mean, for me, I it's like, okay, I've had this restful period, and then I wake up, I'm ready to move. But maybe I should try it and see, do I discover something in that waking and then continuing into a meditative state after that? Because I wonder what's going on in my brain waves and things.
Morning cortisol getting you up and going.
Yeah. So maybe the poses would tone that down a little bit and then let me take the brain refreshed, because at night we say we read the book on sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we sleep?
That's a good book.
Yes, it is, and there's several good books on that topic. But the idea that there's something going on during the sleep pattern period that is very healthy, and we need more of it.
Yeah.
And so maybe for you, it would be best is to get up, do a few poses first, just to get your body moving, and then maybe sit for meditation. Maybe that's what works best for you.
So, how about these other practices like Qigong and Tai Chi? Or you have any experience with any of those?
I cannot speak to any of that. No, I've just been a yoga girl.
Just a yoga.
Just.
Yeah. Did you see that? What'd she call you on that? You can call her on that. Judgmental. Only 20 minutes. Was that it? Just.
Yeah, I've never explored any of those other modalities, so I can't speak to those.
Well, speaking of those words of just, and what was yours? Only. She has one in here called yet. And I love that one. It's like yet.
I use that a lot in teaching.
I bet you do.
If a student says, "Oh, I can't do that," it's like, "Oh, you can't do it yet."
Isn't that wonderful gift you gave that person? I mean, that just opens up the whole world of possibilities.
It's not to say you can't do it ever. It's in this moment. It's not happening.
Yeah, but yet. And that gives us a pause for hope. Well, Tim, where are we on this time schedule here? Anybody got another big idea on this topic?
You're at 38 minutes.
Yeah. So I think our listeners out there may want to know more about yoga, but I would definitely recommend reading Bringing Yoga to Life. If you're thinking about it and you've had some introduction maybe to it's just a gym activity, there's more to it. And it could be quite a benefit to your health and wellness over your lifetime. And so
Absolutely.
thank you for introducing me to Donna Farhi. Is that how you say her name?
Farhi. Mhm.
Farhi. Excellent read for me. So what you going to give it a plus or a?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of great knowledge in here. So even if you're not interested in yoga per se, I think you might be interested after you read this book.
Yeah. It gives some insight that you might not have had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thank you for taking time to join us today.
Absolutely. I had fun.
Sunrise Yoga in Clemens, North
Yes.
Carolina, and you're open.
7 days a week.
Oh, are you? Okay. And how do people get in touch with you?
The best way would be through our website at sunriseyoga.net.
All right, and they can find out more about what you.
They can find out about our studio classes, our online classes, our video library, private sessions, yoga therapy, teacher training.
I was going to say the teacher training is something that you do offer.
Yes,
Yes,
we do.
good.
A 200 and a 300-hour program.
Yeah, and there are not so many places around where you can have access to that. And like I said, I've known several of your students who have gone on through the training, and wonderful thing you're doing for our community. Thank you for coming today. I'm Eleanor at 360health4u.com, helping you make healthy happen and reading a whole lot of books on this topic. How about you, Kristen?
And I'm Kristen Norton, one of the 3 registered dietitians at Well Balanced Nutrition, where we offer nutrition and wellness coaching. And we'd love for you to visit our website, wellbalancednutrition.com, to check out our free content and apply for a free clarity call if you want to know if coaching is right for you. And we really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us, Valerie.
Absolutely happy to.
Have a good day, everybody.
The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.